Nii, tere ka minu poolt ja nii nagu Enn juba ütles, siis esimese ettekandena tuleb meil esitamisele siis BIM-iga seotud strateegilised juhtimisküsimused ja koordineerimisküsimused ning seda tuleb meile siis ette kandma Arto Kiviniemi Salfordi ülikoolist, kes siis hetkel on seal arhitektuuriteaduskonna professor. Palun, Arto.
Okay, I think that this seems to be working. So, first of all, of course, good morning also from my behalf, and thank you for the kind invitation. I'm really happy to be here to speak about the BIM. As you probably can guess from my name, I'm not a typical English name, so I'm from Finland, and I was working in Finland for a long time about around the BIM development. I was leading our national program, and now for 2.5 years I have been working in the University of Salford in Manchester area, in the School of Built Environment as a professor of digital architectural design. Is it working? Yeah, okay. And my specialty area really has been for the last 15 years the development of the BIM. I will start kind of with an example from other industries. If you are still wondering if BIM is something important for you, take this example. Kodak was inventing digital camera in 1975, but the management didn't want to go further with the development of the technology because the film was the golden goose for the company. They made huge profit by selling film, and they were thinking that developing the digital technologies would be endangering the future of the company. And what was the an implication of that decision? Still 20 years ago, Kodak was a very big company, very successful company, making huge profit from film. And then it's the race of the digital technology started, and the film, as you can see from those diagrams, that selling of film was decreasing and digital was growing. And then in January this year, Kodak made bankruptcy. So the company, as we knew it, doesn't exist anymore. And I think that this is something that is at the moment happening in the construction industry as well. I'm old enough that I saw the transition from the manual drafting to CAD in about 20-25 years ago. And now the same situation is happening with the moving from the 2D documentation into the 3D modeling, building information modeling. So I think that it's really something that it's worthwhile thinking that this is a strategic issue for your future as an individual or as a company. Is really something that the times are changing now. And I started at Salford University 2.5 years ago in May 2010. When I arrived to the university, many of my colleagues said to me that BIM is much too complicated, it's expensive, and industry wants people who can make drawings, that we can't start implementing BIM in our curricula in the built environment. But then in October same year, Paul Morrell, who is the chief construction advisor for the UK government, made an announcement that government will start demanding BIM, and that changed the game in UK totally. As a result of that speech that Paul Morrell had, government started to develop new construction strategy. It's not only about BIM, it's also other things, for example, the sustainability, which is very important reason also for the demand of the BIM. And this strategy was published in May 2011. And one part of that is saying that government will demand fully collaborative 3D BIM with all the asset information being electronic by 2016. And this is mandatory for all public projects. So not only the government project, but also on the local authorities. So anything that it's using public money will be demanded to use of BIM. What was the an implication of that announcement was that if you look at the situation where we are now in UK, this slide from Autodesk is looking at the BIM adoption on the vertical axle, and then the BIM policy and contract documentation publicly available in countries on the horizontal axle. And you can see that actually UK is now in Europe #2 after Finland. Finland has been implementing BIM for a long time, so it's not a surprise. But when you think about kind of where 2 years ago UK was somewhere there between Italy and France, and in 2 years the market has changed so that now it's one of the leading countries when you think about not only the kind of the implementation of BIM but also the interest in BIM. This is really showing that even a very big and very conservative market can change very rapidly when there is enough demand to kind of push the change that's happening. So it is really something that I really would say that kind of, and you can expect that it might be happening here as well. It's just that kind of one important decision might be enough to make that change in the marketplace. Then what should you really start considering when you think about the BIM? There is definitely, when I have looked at the situation in UK, there was quite a lot of confusion also what it really means. What is BIM, what it means in the company. So first of all, of course, any company who is working on the commercial environment has to think about the internal benefits. Why do you really want to kind of develop something? Do you want to kind of keep your services basically as the same as they used to be in the traditional design environment? Or are you kind of really thinking about new possibilities enabled by the new technologies? So can you provide more to your customers? Kind of one of the things definitely is the kind of a low-hanging fruit is the improved quality. You will have, when using BIM in the right way, you will have the coherent documentation and less errors in your documentations. You can also increase your productivity. This is one of the things that it's very common misunderstanding that people think that doing the 3D design is kind of taking more time, it's more expensive than the traditional ways. Of course, in the beginning, when you start learning to use the tools, that's true. But when you know how to use the tools, you gain also internal efficiencies when you do it in the right way. Then, of course, one of the strategic decisions, depending on the company size also and your services, is that what kind of software and hardware do you need? Do you want to stay in one platform, or do you need several different tools to be compliant with your partners and customers? And then, of course, one crucial question is the return on the investment. Any tool, including BIM, of course, must pay back kind of the investments that you do in the learning of the tools and also in the hardware software licenses. And then, of course, the external things is really that kind of, when I think, for example, the situation in UK, is it really something that it's worthwhile just kind of to comply with the requirements? If your customer is saying that you have to use BIM, you start using BIM because it's required, but you are not kind of thinking that could there be something more? Or should you really think about kind of that you can actually provide more than the customer is expecting? That's the normal situation if you look at many other industries, that you really try to exceed the customer expectations rather than just fulfilling them. Then, of course, when you kind of think about the possibilities in BIM, it's one of the advantages is the improved communication. It's much easier for our clients to understand the 3D models that we can visualize for them and use the information for the decision support rather than kind of we explaining our drawings what they will get. And this is also providing the possibilities to optioneering, meaning that we can really look for different alternatives very efficiently. We can also simulate the alternatives, and we can try to kind of achieve kind of more different alternatives so that customer can really select what is the best possible option for them. Then the collaborative processes demand that we are looking at the kind of our role in the information flow. It's amazing when we think about the kind of that our industry is very old. We have very strong traditions of sharing information in the traditional documents, but still very few people in our industry really have the full understanding of the information needs and the information flows throughout the process. We are very much focusing on our individual task rather than really understanding what is needed by the others. And this is something that requires quite a lot of learning and also communication between the different parties. Then, of course, one of the low-hanging fruits, one of the easy benefits is the clash detection. And that is something that, if I look globally, is very widely used already. It's more or less routine in the integrated BIM project that clash detection is one of the big benefits. But of course, we should actually move from that to the clash avoidance, really defining the spaces for the technical systems and keep the systems inside those spaces. That's the way that the cars and airplanes are designed, not so that somebody is just putting the systems there and then you start kind of looking where you have clashes, where you have problems between the different design disciplines. And then, of course, interoperability. We are working in a very fragmented industry, very many very small companies in our industry, and people, of course, are selecting their tools based on their own strategic needs. We can't expect that everybody is using the same platforms, so we have to have technologies that are enabling the use of different software. I know that in the next presentation there will be more about the open BIM and interoperability, so I'm not going very deep into that in my presentation. But it's also a strategic need for our industry. It's really important that we have this open BIM and open collaboration possibilities. When you start kind of thinking about BIM implementation in your company, the first question that you should always ask yourself, what are the benefits that you try to achieve with BIM? There are lots of possibilities, and it's not a very good decision to try to kind of do everything at once. As the kind of Americans are using quite often the saying that don't try to boil the ocean. If you try to achieve too much at one time, it's very difficult to get positive results because you are making too many changes at one time. So it's really important to start thinking about kind of a stepwise approach, that what are the benefits that I can achieve easily and fast, and then how I proceed further. BIM is not a goal, it's a tool. And we always have to understand what we try to achieve by using some tool. So just saying that I will go to the BIM because the marketplace seems to requiring that, it's not enough. It's difficult to make good decisions if you don't really think about what you do. This is one of my favorites, this Japanese proverb that vision without action is a daydream and action without vision is a nightmare. And this is very true when you start implementing technologies like BIM, which has a very wide effect in your business processes. Not only technological effects, but it's really kind of defining how you can collaborate with others. Understanding what you want to do is a key to successful implementation of BIM. And it's also that one size doesn't fit all. So it's not, if you have let's say a consultant company of 2-3 people, or if you have a huge construction company, it's very different strategy that you have to select. So you kind of really have to understand that kind of what is fitting to your purposes, what is fitting to your goals in the process. So first thing is that kind of what we do by BIM. The kind of it's easily the situation like in this illustration that we are speaking about the mouse, but the other person is speaking about the computer mouse and the other one is speaking about the real mouse. And of course this kind of confusion, if we speak about BIM and mean different things by that, we can very easily get distracted about what should we do. When we started the national program in Finland in 1997, I was asked by TTKs, our technology agency, to lead that program. This was one of the original slides that kind of already at that time, 15 years ago, basically everybody was using computer, but we still were exchanging the information as digital, kind of traditional documents, either in digital format or in paper format. But nevertheless, what happens is that when we send that information forward, somebody has to read that document, reproduce that information in a different data format to utilize that in the processes. A good example of that, of course, is a quantity takeoff. If you want to take the quantities from the traditional drawings, it's a huge manual process taking a lot of time, and there are lots of possibilities to make mistakes. So you are not really adding value. Much easier what happens if you are adding new errors in the process. And our goal was clearly that we have to be able to move into the environment where we can share the information in a data which is directly usable in different processes. So we can take the quantities out of the model, use them in the cost estimation and procurement process, or we can take the architectural model and use that for the energy simulation. So sharing the data so that it can be directly utilized in other processes was the key question. And this is still, in my opinion, one of the main things when we think about the integration of BIM. Then it's kind of reflecting in many other things in the processes. So it's not just that kind of that one level. There are many other levels that are related to that. But key issue is that you have to have the data which is computer readable instead of documents which are human readable. Also, when we speak about the BIM, quite often it's used to mean the building information model, meaning the instantiation, the representation of the end product, the building, as the model. But we can also use BIM to represent the building information modeling, meaning the process of creating that information. Or, as I personally prefer, we can kind of take the building information management. So, because modeling is a little bit difficult word in that sense that people easily think that the building information model means the 3D representation of the building, just the geometry. Of course, it's part of the building information model, but it's not all. It's really about the information modeling, and information inside the model is much more important. It's also that buildings have a very long life cycle. So creating that information, the modeling process, is relatively small part of that. Much more work is done by managing that information through the whole kind of design and construction phases, and also in the life cycle of the building. So that's why I personally prefer to use BIM, meaning building information management. Okay, what happened? Kind of doesn't seem to be moving now. It's kind of, I don't know. Okay, okay, now it's moving. And this is actually from Tekla's presentation, as you can see from the slide layout. And this is just kind of illustrating some of the things, that there are lots of things that have nothing or very little to do with the building geometry. Like, for example, if you think about the request for information or approvals or kind of the tasks that you are doing there. So we are managing not only the product information, but also the process information in the building information modeling environment. So it's very important on that. You also might see sometimes the term VDC, Virtual Design and Construction. And I thought that it's maybe worthwhile kind of to look a little bit kind of what are the meanings. BIM is actually a relatively new term. It was kind of replacing the old term building product modeling, which was used earlier about 10 years ago. And at the same time, Stanford University was introducing the VDC approach. Basically, they are very similar. That VDC is in many ways the kind of, and you could say that it's the same as BIM. But there are a couple of things that Stanford University, CIFE there, the Center of Integrated Facility Engineering, is emphasizing, which I think it's also that those are very important aspects in this context when speaking about the strategic implementation of BIM. I have marked on the red color the things that usually people are not so much considering when speaking about the BIM. First of all, it's really that VDC by definition is always having these three aspects: product, organization, and process. And organizational aspects are not very often considered in BIM. And then also things that SciFi is bringing the VDC environment very much on kind of in the forefront of the whole issues is business metrics. So you are measuring your business benefits that you have there. So focus is more on the strategic management. And I think that this is very important in the BIM implementation. But not often thinking when people start speaking about BIM. In the BIM terminology, people usually concentrate much more about the technology. And really you have to kind of take this economical impact analysis. You really have to think about your investments, not only the investments in the hardware and software, but investments in the changes of your processes, investments in the learning of your people in your company. Because really buying the software license is just the tip of the iceberg. Much more is invested in the kind of learning how to use that in your processes. So in that sense, I think that VDC approach is good, that it's really bringing these issues very clearly kind of into the discussion and consideration. But basically, we are speaking about the same thing when we are speaking about VDC or BIM. And we have, in our university, we have a master's program in integrated design. Our timing was really perfect because we started to develop the course before the government announced the demand for that. And last year when we started that, last year was the first one, now is the second year of this program. We are the only university in UK providing a formal education in the BIM and integrated design, which is actually a multidisciplinary course. We have architects, engineers, project managers, construction managers, quantity surveyors in the course. So it's not just about design, it's more about really managing the process. And it's really important in the process that BIM is the enabling technology, but we are concentrating much more on the kind of holistic view about the managing the learning of the processes and people issues. So it's a big cultural change as well, not only technology. So BIM is not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet which is solving all the problems in our industry. It's not a kind of philosopher's stone which is changing the lead into gold, so bringing huge profits immediately. It's really a change agent rather. So it's really a fundamental process change. It's very, very good communication media. It's enabler for the better information management and better process management, and it's also enabling the virtual prototyping of the building, so we can start simulating the behavior of the buildings in a very cost-efficient way when we use the integrated BIM. But BIM is only an enabler. We get those benefits only by changing the way that we are working. If we use BIM just to produce the drawings, we are getting a very small part of the potential benefits that BIM could be providing to our organizations. So it's really important to kind of understand that it doesn't stop there when you buy your software package. It's really just the starting point. After that is really the big effort in the companies. And to understand that is also kind of when you think about how to use the models, one of the fundamental issues is that we have to understand what is a model. And model is a very ambiguous word. There are many meanings for the word. Is it this kind of a process model, or is it a mathematical model? Is it a physical model that we use to build in our industries and still, of course, are building those? Or is it, many people, when you speak about model, it's kind of this is what people think easily what a model means. Or it can be building information model. What is the reason? Why are we calling all these different things as a model? What is the combining thing? What is the shared thing about what makes them to a model? The best definition I have found is this Jeff Rothenberg's definition. A model represents reality for a given purpose. the model is an abstraction of reality in the sense that it cannot represent all aspects of reality. And when you start thinking about that, even the fashion model fits into this definition. It's an abstraction for a certain purpose. It's giving a very shallow image of a human being for a purpose. And that's why we can call also that as a model. And when people start understanding this, it really makes the kind of much easier to start understanding what you should be thinking when you start kind of thinking about modeling. You have to think about the purpose of the model. Without understanding what are you going to use the model for, you can't build an appropriate model. Because you have to think that kind of you should put into the model only the things that are beneficial for the use of the model. We can never put everything in the model. And this is something that when I have been discussing with many owners about the BIM, it's amazing how common misunderstanding there is that many owners think that if the designers and construction companies are using BIM, you will automatically get the facility management model of the building for your FM processes. Which is of course not true, because the designers are not producing a facility management model normally. You have to define what you want from the model and tell to the designers what to put into the model so that it's fulfilling those requirements. So, and this is also meaning that by definition, architectural model and structural model and MEP model, construction model, they have different content because they are used for different purposes. So we can't have one huge model which is covering everything. We have to always kind of think that an efficient model is made for a purpose. Then of course, when we start using the models for example, design integration, we have to include the information which is needed for the coordination into those models. But again, it's something that we have to define. We have to think about what we want from the models. Models don't include more than you put there. And also the correctness of the information is dependent on the human actions. So the modeling doesn't automatically mean that you don't have any mistakes. Models are just providing much better tools to reduce the number of errors. And just to illustrate about these different usages, and it's not a full list of possibilities, but first you can of course start using modeling, like many architect offices started to use it in the early days, that just doing it for your internal purposes. You just make the models to gain efficiencies in your own processes and generate the drawings, but you're not sharing the information with the other disciplines. Or you can kind of, it's of course, it's then very kind of a small part of the benefits that you can get there from that, but it can be also a business case already on that level. But then kind of usually the first step is that kind of the different discipline models are merged together, checked together to find the clashes and errors, which is definitely improving the process a lot. You get rid of many of the errors that you have in the manual or the 2D processes. Then of course you can use also the models for the construction management, quantity takeoff, cost estimation, scheduling purposes, again dependent on the content of the models. From the client viewpoint, like for example in the UK government, is environmental life cycle analysis a very important part of the process. They really want to kind of test the building's energy consumption and also the embedded energy, the sustainability impacts of the building. Then of course you can also start simulating the business processes in the buildings. For example, for airports, that's something that is relatively easy to do because they are more like process plants where kind of people are flowing through the building and you can simulate that relatively easily. But you can do that also in hospitals and already on some level even in office buildings or similar type of buildings. And that is of course if you can make the business processes that happen in the building more efficient. That's where the big money is. When you think about, for example, hospitals where the salaries in 2-3 years are more than the construction cost of the building. If you can optimize really the efficiency of the staff working in the hospital, then of course you are bringing much more added value for the client in that sense. And then, of course, in the life cycle view, you can also use the models for the facility management and maintenance processes, considering that you have the information that is needed there. Then also one of the discussions that comes quite often on the table is really kind of that is BIM one model or is it several different models, and who owns the data? And in this context, now I'm speaking about ownership, meaning that who can change the data in the models, not about the intellectual property or copyright issues, which also sometimes are discussed. Personally, I don't think that kind of using the models is changing any copyright issues. The copyright is something which is basically similar in the BIM environment as it's also in the 2D world, but that is something that is often discussed as well. But it's important to really understand the kind of the ownership, in meaning that who can change that. My first experience about the BIM was 1993. I was asked to evaluate one big EU project called Combine 2. The presentation was made in Dublin. I went there and saw a presentation. They made a prototype implementation of integrated project environment. And the team was really proud when they were showing kind of that if you took the ventilation duct and moved that, the hole in the beam was moving with the duct. And I was kind of totally kind of are you really serious about that? There is no way that the structural engineer can accept that kind of a situation, that HVAC engineer is changing the location and in the worst case also the size of the holes in the structures, because that's a structural issue. And already at that time I was kind of immediately saying that you have to have two objects. The other one is the need for the hole, owned by the HVAC engineer. The other one is the actual hole, which is owned by the structural engineer. And the systems must be flagging if there is a contradiction between those two things. But you can't kind of change the responsibilities in the process, because HVAC engineers are not capable to do structural analyses. And this is something that doesn't change in the environment where it doesn't matter what is the kind of the system where we are working. We can't change the borderlines of the responsibilities of different professions, because our education is giving us the kind of capabilities to do the things that we really kind of master and understand. One of the reasons why this idea of this one model is so common, I think that this diagram made in Building Smart, or at that time in the International Alliance for Interoperability, was done. This is easily creating the illusion that there is one project model where everybody is working. Myself, I was the first international chairman of IAI, so it's kind of, and I'm not blaming anybody else, but I think that this was a wrong way to communicate about the thing. So this quite common understanding that there would be this one integrated BIM and everybody would be working in real time in that environment, this is something that I would say that forget that. First of all, there is no technology for that, and secondly, this data ownership is really preventing that. Even if you go to the environment like, for example, digital project by Gary Technologies using CATIA, where you have basically one platform where you have all the models, still you have, when you go inside the system, you have the domain models inside that, because of the reason of this ownership reason. So it's always the integrated BIM is consisting of domain models owned by that profession or the people responsible of that task. And the integrated BIM means an environment where you are sharing at least some parts of your model, not necessarily 100% of the content that you have in your own model, but the part that is needed for the integration. But everybody is editing and working in their own model. And the kind of the integration happens on different level. And this is really not a technological flaw or shortcoming. This is something which is necessity for the processes. And actually the picture is even more complicated than that. When we start thinking about kind of a project in a company environment, In a company, you have these internal databases and libraries, which can be then connected to external databases and libraries. We have more and more BIM object libraries available in the web, where you can take the objects and as a part of your internal library. And then, for example, in construction company, you have your cost and method databases, material prices, so forth in the different databases. So you connect your project model into those different databases. So basically, integrated BIM is a network of different information sources linked together. And when you need, for example, the cost estimation, you aggregate the information so that the quantities are coming from the design models, cost information is coming from the cost databases, you are using your method databases for that aggregation. Price is not a kind of an attribute of an object in the model. You can't embed the price information into the object on the object level in the models. Technically, you can do it, but it would not be wise because the prices can change very dramatically when something happens on the marketplace. One big project in China can change the steel prices dramatically in a very short time frame. So we have to kind of have these kind of live linkages between the information. So it's not a huge one database where you put everything. It's more really kind of a connected information. So when we think about the adoption of BIM, where are we at the moment? When I think about kind of the history of BIM, in the early 90s we were then in that situation where innovators were kind of visioning about the possibilities. Then, as always with new technologies, there is this chasm, the situation where the technology either can die or then jump over that chasm and go living. I think that the current market situation is somewhere between the bowling alley and tornado phases. Bowling alley means that the market is kind of newly distributed. So the kind of the players are looking at their position on the marketplace. What is my strategic position on the market? Tornado means the situation where the market is growing very rapidly. In UK at the moment we are definitely in the tornado phase, so the market is really expanding. And in 5-10 years we will be in the situation that BIM will be the kind of the normal way of working, and then of course kind of in the mainstream. And of course, some players still kind of are laggards that are adopting things. This is very typical for the new technologies always. When they come to the marketplace, this is the adoption way that happens in there. 2 years ago, unfortunately, there is no newer data at the moment available. McGraw-Hill has been doing this market research in the United States and now also in Europe, but this Europe means just the big countries, UK, France, and Germany. In Europe, for example, it was excluding the Nordic countries. But as you can see, 2 years ago, majority of the marketplace was not using BIM. So regardless what was really the kind of the situation. At the moment, for example, I would say that in United States, probably, at least if you look at the kind of the market volume, not just kind of the number of construction companies, I would say that most of the contractors are using now BIM. I think that it has been growing so much. But still, it's something that kind of, it's not a commonplace technology yet in many places. What is also interesting that if you compare the situation in Europe and in United States, you can see that in United States in 2010, a lot of companies that had very little experience of BIM, even though the adoption was ahead of Europe already at that time. In Europe, you have much more companies who have longer experience of the using BIM. It's really something that the kind of things have been moving here slowly, more slowly than in United States. But as said, that now it seems that also the speed in Europe is growing, especially in UK. Also, when you look at the kind of different predictions of how companies see that kind of, and if they currently are using kind of BIM on certain level, you can clearly see that kind of the use of BIM is growing. So this is looking at the companies saying that how many percentages of their projects are using BIM. So it's clearly, we should now be then in the kind of on right-hand figure, so because this is now 2012, so we should be there. Unfortunately, I don't have the data to confirm that, but to me it seems that at least in UK, probably it's even more than that. So we are moving towards BIM. It's not yet something that would be, you are not too late if you start adopting BIM at the moment. Most of the industry is still in the phase of thinking about adopting it. In Finland, the Confederation of Finnish Construction Industry took BIM as a part of the technology strategy already 10 years ago. So this figure is from year 2002. And this is showing one of the big benefits of BIM. If you use BIM as the database from which you are generating the documents, you inevitably will have coherent documentation. One of the big problems traditionally in our environment has been that when we make the true kind of traditional drawings and specifications and schedules, when we make one change, we have to change many documents, and usually you always forget to change something. So you will have, and in the end, you have a contradictory documents. One document is saying something, and another document is saying something else, which is then causing a lot of problems and also increasing prices in the marketplace. So it's really, this is one of the low-hanging fruits, one of the things that's happening easily. Improved communication and shared understanding, it's definitely another one. This is a typical HVAC drawing, traditional drawing. It's very complicated to read. Our clients definitely don't understand at all, and even for building professionals, you need several sections of the same space before you can really kind of understand where the ducts are, because this is just a two-dimensional kind of a schema of that, kind of you can't know where they are in the three-dimensional space. When you move into the 3D modeling, it's a no-brainer. Everybody can understand this. And this is already widely used, for example, in the United States. On site, you have big screens where the site manager is explaining to the crew what should be built today by using models, walkthroughs, and really showing the details what should be built. It's really kind of something that it's improving the shared understanding. And of course also already in the design phase, this is creating in the team the same understanding of the same things. So people really understand the issues the same way. Reduction of errors and mistakes. Of course, most of these are really almost jokes, but real images anyway, not photoshopped. So strange things happen in our world. But if you look at the picture where you have this camera and a monitor, that is something that I would claim seriously, that even the best teams can easily make that kind of a mistake. When you start thinking about how many technical systems we have nowadays in a building, and if you have just 2D drawings, and you try to identify all the conflict between the different systems, it's almost impossible to make it so that you don't have any mistakes. But when you kind of merge the models and see something like that, of course, everybody understands immediately that you can't build it that way. And this is definitely something that when you look at the international research about the BIM benefits, reduction of errors and mistakes, it's very clearly indicated there. It's partly coming from the coherent documentation, partly coming from the better communication and possibility to see the errors in more efficient way. And this, of course, together is kind of a reduction the change orders. And as you can see from the names of the boats, the rubber boats is the original contract, the yacht is the change orders. We do have in our industries a lot of companies whose business model is based on the expectation that you can make a very low bid and then you make your profit by change orders, which is very bad for the customers. But typically, in the construction process, you allocate about 10% of the cost for the change orders, because that's the level where you normally are. And this is something that I know already that there are several projects using BIM where there has been zero change orders. No change orders at all in the process. And for example, also I know that Helsinki Music Center is one project where it was really dramatically less than budgeted. So it's really the efficient and right way of using BIM is really reducing the change orders and additional costs which are related to that. And when you think about the use of BIM, it's of course also part of that is kind of an, I would say, marketing buzz. It's really something that it's important. This is from United States. And when something becomes kind of almost a fashion or fad in the marketplace, of course it's something that kind of you have to tell that you are using that. So it has also an impact in your marketing. As you can see here that this perceived buzz in the marketplace is actually number one there. 61% of the responders say that it's very high or high, so that it's really kind of affecting their their businesses. But also that kind of that when you look at the real usages, you see a lot of different aspects that people think that are important for the marketing. And definitely reducing the errors, the reliability of the cost estimation, reducing risks. There are lots of things that are following from the use of BIM. And also when you look at the BIM benefits when related to ROI, the return on investment. So is it bringing money back? As you can see here, the number one is clearly this better multi-party communication and understanding of 3D visualizations, and the improved project process outcomes and fewer requests for information and field coordination problems, improved productivity, increased prefabrication, then positive impact in marketing and so forth. So lots of benefits that the companies really see that are really kind of paying back for the investments. Also, when you look at how companies feel about the potential of BIM, it's clearly there that kind of almost every company is seeing that either they are just scratching the surface of BIM, or they see that they already get a lot of benefits, but there is much more to gain. Very, very few companies see that they are either not getting benefits or they get all the benefits that are potentially there. And personally, I think that if anybody is saying that they get all the benefits from BIM that's there, I think that they don't understand or they are lying. Because I don't think that there is a company in the world that would be kind of really taking all the benefits that are potentially there. It's so new, and when the kind of your supply chain and partners are learning how to use there will be more and more issues that you can gain from that. Then also, when you look at kind of perceived ROI, so how the people see or expect that BIM is paying back. As you can see, there's some difference, not a dramatical difference between the countries in the middle part, but if you look at the negative ROI, so that companies who see that it's more kind of actually spending money in BIM instead of bringing money. Then you see that in the United States in 2010, it was there were much more companies seeing that it was negative impact than in Europe. Actually, there is an explanation for that. If you remember the earlier picture where you look at the experience of using BIM, which was much higher experience was much higher in Europe than in USA. In USA, there were many companies that BIM was something totally new for them. Of course, when you are learning how to use BIM, in the beginning, it will have a negative impact into your business processes, because a lot of your effort is going how to learn it, which means, of course, that you should learn it fast so that you can kind of gain the benefits. But when you look at kind of when you kind of start getting more experiences, you start kind of getting more benefits. Also, when you look at kind of the different expectations in the European countries, UK, France, and Germany, you can see that, for example, over 100% the Germans are relatively doubtful about that. Can you really kind of get more than 100% return on your investments? But I think that this is more like kind of a national flavor about the expectations of BIM. But typically, when you look at majority of the companies are really seeing or expecting that there will be benefits from that. But then very interesting image is this, that kind of when you compare the companies who are just thinking about the possible benefits and compare that to companies who are measuring the benefits of BIM, what you see is that there are much fewer companies who have measured negative impact of BIM. and much more companies who have measured kind of big benefits of BIM. So it's much more, when companies are measuring the BIM benefits, the results are much better than if they just kind of have the image about what's happening in my company. It's an interesting question. Is it so that people are too pessimistic about the kind of the impact, or is it so that those companies who really measure their processes are better in implementing BIM? I would be kind of quite confident to say that probably the latter. The companies who really want to measure what's happening in their processes, they get more benefits from that. Because usually the old saying is that what you can't measure, you can't manage. So measuring things is really important in the process development. But definitely there is clearly possibilities to get benefits from BIM. But there are also some challenges. First of all, it's really kind of, BIM is not a new technology. This Gartner's hype cycle curve is usually applied for the new technologies, and 10 years ago this was also kind of applicable to BIM. Then normally the situation is so that the industry is mainly in a certain phase, either kind of getting to this peak of inflated expectations or kind of getting disappointed or really adopting it. But now we have the situation that the companies are all over the map. There are companies already in the plateau of productivity, and there are companies who are just kind of in the technology trigger, and all over the place. In UK, definitely the situation is so that leading companies are already implementing BIM very successfully in their processes. It's not something that they are testing, they really are doing business with that. But majority of companies are really on this kind of hype curve, kind of having expectations, and will be disappointed when they kind of start to understand that there is much more work to do before they really get the benefits. That's typical, because we human beings are built that way, that we want to have simple solutions to complex problems. And BIM is not an exception of that. People easily think that, okay, this is solving all my problems just like that. It's helping in that, but you have to do the work. It's a little bit like, somebody was using the comparison, it's kind of BIM is a little bit like kind of buying a membership in a fitness club. Buying the card doesn't give you anything. It doesn't improve your health at all. You have to start working yourself, and BIM is exactly like that. Buying the software but not changing your processes, it doesn't really bring you the benefits. So you have to do something about that. One of the challenges is also that when you look at the industry, there are very different levels of understandings of BIM. If you look at, this is from the Government Strategy Training and Education Working Group. And also when we think about kind of this challenge that the UK government has given to the industry. How do we educate 150,000 companies and 3 million people in 4 years? There is no way. It's kind of it's totally impossible. Now at the moment I think that there are 3 universities having BIM as really part of the education, and of course it's emerging on different levels. But then kind of looking at the industry, how many people are working in the companies, it's a huge task. Who is going to educate the educators? It's going to be really a big challenge how to make this change. And of course it means that there is no way that everybody in the industry after 4 years will be on board. There will be a big divide between the companies who have successfully implemented BIM and are going forward, and companies who are still stuck in the situation that they don't know what to do. An interesting question is government going to keep that demand, kind of that you have no business in the kind of on the public side unless you are using BIM. If that will be kept, then the kind of there is much less competition in the marketplace, because many companies will be totally out of business at that time. It will be interesting to see how that problem will be solved. But nevertheless, things are moving, and definitely many companies will be there. Not those 150,000, but many companies will be there. We have to also be able to measure about our own competencies. And that diagram in the previous picture is not good enough for that purpose, because the kind of the levels are much too coarse. You have to have much more kind of detailed view about the different aspects of BIM. And this is from the USA, from the National BIM Standard Maturity Model, looking at different aspects of BIM. And this is very important when you, both on the project level and company level, when you kind of have decided what you want to do in a project or in your company, then you have to measure, do I have the competencies to do it? Or is some part of my activities too weak to achieve the goals that I have set to myself? So developing those weaknesses, it's important. It's a little bit like kind of if you think about decathlon in the sports, you really have to improve your worst kind of capabilities more than kind of just if you are very good in some area, you can forget that and kind of keep that on the level and develop the things that are preventing you to achieve your goals. I said that in our industry we have this typical view that we are kind of restricted to our role. It's one of the strengths also in our industry. It's in the traditional way, construction industry is very good in starting new projects. I have been speaking with people for example, in other industries, let's say information technology, and they are always wondering that how is it possible that you have an ad hoc team and you immediately everybody starts working productively. Kind of a very little time is used to kind of wonder what's my role in this project, that what should I be doing. Everybody knows that. It's a strength in the traditional environment, but it can be also a hindrance in the new situation. We are so strongly focusing on the things that we used to do that we are not able to see what we should be doing in the new processes. And this is something that it's quite challenging to change the way that people are thinking. And the typical business model is in our industry is the low bid process, where you are asking the lowest price and select the team based on that. And that is of course leading to the sub-optimization. Everybody has to minimize their own workload because otherwise you can't make good business. And this is something which is also creating the situation that if you kind of keep everything as it was and just implement BIM, the question for the upstream players like designers is, why should I produce more and more accurate information because the guys in the downstream will get the benefits. I'm not benefiting from that. Why should I do it? And this is a really relevant question. So we can't just kind of continue the work the way that we have been working in traditionally. And also in many countries, legal responsibilities have been one of the big obstacles. The integrated project delivery was kind of removing big parts of that problem in United States, and it really started to kind of speed up the use of integrated integrated building information modeling in USA, and something similar is needed also here. In UK, actually, one of the government working groups, there are at least 15 different work groups there, is looking at the contractual issues and even insurances. Kind of new insurance models about so that the insurance companies have products that we can use in the new working environment. One of the things that it's definitely needed when we start implementing BIM is we have to rethink about the process. We did in Finland some analysis of our early BIM projects, and it very clearly was indicating that there were problems in the information flow. Typically, some parts of information came too late, so that you should have had that information earlier when you made a decision. And that comes from the kind of traditional processes. So 80% of the problems that we identified there were related to the process and people's skills. Only 20% of the problems had some technical reasons behind that. And again, that is something which I think it's important to understand, that it's really, when people say that the technology is not mature, that you can't use BIM because of some technical shortcomings, it's not true. It's really, the problems are much more on the human side, not on the technical side. The tools are there. Our industry is behind the technology in using the tools. And in a way, it's kind of the way that we are working at the moment with BIM. It's a little bit like this old story about these blind monks examining the elephant. that everybody is just feeling their own part, kind of, and that those guys who are kind of touching the tail are describing the elephant in a very different way than those guys who are touching the ears. And in a way, we have that situation in our industry that we see only our part of the process, but we don't see the big picture. And this is something where I think that the role of the universities is very important, that we have to start kind of take much more holistic view about the processes, develop the understanding of how we should be kind of thinking about our role in the whole, rather than just kind of thinking about that kind of that, okay, my task is to make those drawings and that's it, I don't care who is using them and how. And related to this business models is really this kind of I think that this diagram is also showing something very important. When you look at the upstream companies, architects and engineers, you can see that their perceived ROI is much more negative than if you look at contractors and owners. Very few owners see any negative impacts in BIM because they get the benefits. And this is, of course, means that we have to start thinking about the business model. Is there really an incentive for the designers to do something differently? And that is, of course, something which is, I think that it's one of the crucial questions, that how do we do that? I'm not saying that we have to start kind of immediately paying more for the design, because we have to also be sure that we get more benefits from the process, not just spending more money there, but that the whole process is more efficient. And therefore, I really like this integrated project delivery model. This is some years old example of the Camino Medical Center. Sutter Health is one of the leading owners in the United States using the IPD. They actually initiated that they were the first company kind of in using that model. The idea there is that you have a target price and schedule, and then you have a model which is fixed in the beginning of the project, where you agree about how to share the benefits. If the project is successful, everybody is getting their share from the profit. If the project is failing, everybody is suffering. At the moment, Sutter Health is doing all the projects so that 100% of the profit of all key participants is dependent on the project outcome. So until that day when you know what is the real outcome, everybody gets only their expenses, but no profit. And which means that, for example, the bookkeeping is totally transparent. All project participants have to show their cost structures, what they are invoicing. And it's a huge change in our industry, if you really think about that kind of. You have to open your books. What is my kind of, what are my real costs? You can't hide any profit in there. And then in the end, you will get the profit if the project is successful. And this has been very successful business model. Sutter Health has been very good in implementing that. And all the partners want to continue with them because they see that this is actually creating much better business for everyone. So this is not something kind of the typical win-lose, that if I win, you lose, or vice versa, which is very typical in our industry. This is really win-win-win type of situation, that everybody is getting more. But modeling is also kind of important to think about this, that what is really needed. As I said earlier, that kind of, and you have to think about what you try to achieve. Very common problem in companies, what I have been talking with engineering and architectural companies, is that people easily start putting too much things too early in the models, because it's technically possible. And they don't really kind of think about the process needs and kind of staging the content of the model dependent on the different stages. So we should really kind of try to analyze what should be there, what is really needed. And I personally like very much this. This is from Jiri Hietanen from TTKs. He introduced in Building Smart this concept of useful minimum. That we should really concentrate on the things that we must have in the model, rather than things that nice to have. Because you can put a lot of information there, but you should not kind of just increase the amount of data because it's technically possible. There must always be a reason for it. I like these, as you can see, I like these kind of comparisons. To me, making a good model is a little bit like making a good movie or novel, that you are not adding anything which is not necessary to tell the story there. So you really kind of try to be as economic as possible in the storytelling. Only what is needed is there at the point when it's needed for that story. And this is, again, it's something that it requires quite a lot of knowledge about the information flows and what everybody is needing in that, so that you can really implement that into the practices. What I'm really happy about is that in UK, what is happening is that the government working groups are really working on this. So it's not stopping on the level that kind of we are requiring BIM. Now it's starting to get also the content, what is needed. What in UK is called the data drops. So in the different phases of the project, you have 4 of these data drops. And each data drop, you have these kind of diagrams and also more and more detailed information, what is required at that point for the decision making. And this is really something that it's really essential also for the client side, for the government, so that they do have an understanding what they need in their processes, in their decision making from the designers at different stages. So first you have a very simple model in the schematic phase, more like kind of a spatial model. Actually, those who know the Senate Properties Guidelines or the COBIM, which Tom is going to speak later today, can see that kind of UK government people have been also reading the Senate Properties Guidelines. They have been used also as a basis of this. But nevertheless, it's really kind of adopted into the UK practices. Then the level 2 is outline solutions. Again, a lot of more details about that. Construction information, what is needed before you start the construction. And then the last data drop, which is basically the as-built, the operation and maintenance information, which is needed for the use of the buildings. And this work is still ongoing, of course, because the deadline is going to be in 2016. There is still time to develop these. There are several pilot projects ongoing where these requirements are tested. Does it function? Are we able to do it? Is it really the things that we need in our processes? So it's very thorough work, and it has been really amazing to see how fast people have accepted the idea that the industry has to change. Most probably one of the reasons is that the construction industry is a very relatively bad situation in UK. UK economy is not very good at the moment. And people see BIM as a way to survive. They really see that kind of position yourself in a leading position on this area is helping your businesses in the future. So it's really, I think that if we would have very good times, people would not be so eager to do the changes because their thinking would be that I'm doing good business anyway. It's kind of, why should I change? Now when people see that the problems, they really start to go there. There will be actually in the next presentations more about this proprietary or open data format. This is also a strategic question and depends of course on your position in the market. If you are a private owner, you can of course make a decision to stay in one software platform. You can use that. But for example, public owners cannot do it. So all the public requirements of BIM are based on the open data. There are some benefits and kind of problems related to both. Open data, which I personally really support very much, is giving much more flexibility. You can choose the tools you want to use and you can use them in any business environment. Proprietary data, the data content can be richer, so you can have more information because standards, of course, always are limited to a certain stage, so you can't kind of change them so rapidly. So and also the implementation quality can be different in different products. So there are some challenges in the open data, but in the long run, I think that it's very important for our industry and our business processes that we are kind of keeping the freedom to select the best tools that we can find in the marketplace and use them in our processes. So basically, I would say that kind of unless you have very strong reasons to stick in the one platform, you should not do that decision. You should really look at the open BIM and open possibilities. But it's really kind of, the industry foundation class is the standard for the building information modeling, IFC. It's an enabling specification. It's not kind of the total solution. Just having the specification doesn't help you. Somebody has to implement that into the software tools and implement that in the high quality so that you can use the tools. And then, of course, it's really up to us that we are developing our processes and business models and skills so that we can really adopt these new tools. So again, there is no easy solution. It's kind of it's consisting from many different issues that kind of are together building the possibilities to do things. Often you hear that kind of, at least in UK, there are quite a lot of people who really say that IFC doesn't work, or that there are no software applications supporting IFCs. It's not true. As you can see, there are 151 applications at the moment supporting the IFC data standard. And what is, in my opinion, even more important is that compared to the situation a year ago, it has been increasing more than 10%. So 1 year ago it was 136 applications, now it's 151. So it's really growing. So it's something that the software industry is clearly adopting in our industry. So then some examples, just kind of to illustrate some of the things. BIM has, Skanska has the BIM Competence Center in Finland, the Global BIM Competence Center. And what is unique is that they are using BIM in the residential production. So small, kind of a relatively simple small building. And one of the things is that they really use BIM as a quality tool. That's one of the aspects, which I think it's really important aspect of that. Another one is that they have made a clear strategy of the different stages of adopting BIM. So you have these different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, and business units and projects can decide what is the level of BIM usage that they want to implement in this case. So it's kind of it's giving a structure in advising people what to do, what are the easy and what are more demanding things that you can do with BIM. And it's helping kind of the company people to decide how to proceed. They also have started to use the BIM for the safety and site planning. So they are, as you can see, they are putting the temporary structures and also the storage spaces in the model. So they are really kind of showing where you should be storing, for example, the gypsum sheets or other building materials. Many people think that this is really kind of a waste of time. It's taking too much time to build these models that it can't be profitable. But I can guarantee to you that this is something that it's really paying back. It's increasing the productivity because without this kind of a detailed planning, you easily end up kind of putting the things in the place where you should actually build the wall and you have to kind of move them again to be able to do the next processes. And that happens on site a lot. So it's really something that kind of, and using the models, they have very good libraries and tools, so the site people are doing this based on the structural and architectural model, this site planning. So, and it's also improving the safety on the site. They can use this also for the education of the people to have the walkthroughs and identifying the different risk places. So BIM is not just for big mega projects. You can use it successfully also in small projects. You can use also BIM very efficiently in the analysis of sustainability. And you have to start doing that early in the process, not just kind of when everything is designed to the end, then kind of make the calculations and see if you get the green label or not. You should use that as a design tool to kind of steer the design solutions so that you will achieve the benefits that you want to have. It's also, as I said in earlier, kind of, and it's enabling the virtual prototyping. This is from Granlund, which is the leading building services engineering office in Finland. Just kind of to illustrate what amount of tools you have to analyze the buildings. These are all tools that this company is using in their daily production, not something research. Of course, you are not using every tool in every project, like, for example, computational fluid dynamics is only for if there are some special demands on the building, but nevertheless, it's in the tool set. So you can use it, and this is an integrated platform so that you can use those tools in a very efficient way. Also, they have been kind of expanding their role from just being the building designers to manage the data when the facility is operated and reporting that to the customers, which is bringing them near to the customers so that they are kind of discussing with the customer all the time, and which means that when the customer is doing some renovation of their buildings, they probably will contact them. So they have kind of the probability to get any changes that the customer is doing much easier than kind of the normal designers who are there only in the design phase and then disappear from the picture. Also, kind of it's providing the strategic tools for the companies that when they are managing the data of the operations, they are reporting that on the different levels. So they are collecting the data on the grassroots level from the technical systems and on the maintenance people, reporting that on the kind of portfolio level, on the kind of local managers, but also to the top management of the company. And that is providing them, again, straight access with the strategic level in the company and discussions. And this is something that, good example of that kind of expanding your services from the traditional things that you were doing. And Granlund definitely has been a very successful company in implementing these ideas into the practices and really growing their business, not just doing something for fun. And they have also this reporting building where you kind of combine the building information model with the data that you collect from the building and compare the simulation. You have the weather station on the building measuring what are the weather conditions. You run that to the simulation so that how the building should be behaving. You compare that with the data that's coming from the building automation system, how it's really behaving, and compare them so you can identify if there are some anomalies or some problems in the building. So you can kind of merge the virtual and real worlds. More and more possibilities are coming. Okay. And when I was showing that example of Skanska's site modeling, I want to end my presentation to this example from California, DPR Construction, which in my opinion is probably the most innovative construction company in the world. This is the level of detail that they are modeling their processes now. So they are not just modeling the end result, how the building is when it's finished, but they are modeling the components where they are really on the component level put in there, and also all the fixtures. And look at the image. This is the photo of the same place. So it's not just for fun, it's really done that way. They really put the things in the place where they plan to put them. So they really do, almost like in the car manufacturing or airplane industries, that you really model the whole process of installing something, not just kind of the end result of that. And this is the level where the leading companies are going. So there is a huge potential when you start thinking about kind of how to implement it. And I don't think that this is going to be the kind of the end. I think that kind of this is now more than a year old picture. I think that there might be something even more astonishing if you would go and visit that company now. So it's really interesting when you look at kind of the possibilities in the BIM environment. So my last slide. Kind of for many people, BIM is a little bit like this scenery in the Peak District in England. Kind of the future is somewhere there, for a little bit foggy. But the only way to start kind of seeing further is that start walking. Because otherwise, if you start if you just stop here and wait until the fog is disappearing, it can take a quite long time, and the others are already so far ahead of you that it's difficult to kind of reach them anymore. So my advice is that start walking. You might not exactly know what you expect to find there, but when you start walking that path, you will see further and further. It's making your kind of your implementation much easier than just trying to figure out that kind of I'm waiting until it's ready. Okay, thank you.
Nii aitäh Artole ja tegelikult ma tahtsingi just öelda, et teeme väga erksa aplausi ja täname Artot, aga te jõudsite juba ennem plaksutama hakata, kui ma seda jõudsin öelda. Aga lähme nüüd siis küsimuste juurde ja meil on 10-15 minutit aega, et küsida siis küsimused. et üht kätt ma juba näen, et mõelge küsimused ilusasti peas läbi ning siin on 2 poissi, kes jooksevad mikrofonidega mööda saali ringi ning küsige ikka küsimus siis ikka ilusasti mikrofoni sisse, et ka tõlkijad siis üleval kuuleksid. Aitäh!
How do you actually compare the return of investment? Like, projects are very specific and not comparable. So with using BIM or not using, how do you compare the return?
It's a very good question, and quite often asked that kind of really, as you say, that the basic problem in our industry that the baseline is very fuzzy. Every project is different, and there are a huge amount of different things that are really affecting to the results. Just having a great project manager can make a huge difference in the profitability. So how are you able to say that it was because of BIM that I achieved these results? And this is something that I don't think that anybody has kind of a very clear answer that how to measure that so that you can really be sure that you are measuring the impact of BIM and not something else. The only way that I can say that kind of you can reliably do that is that when you start kind of looking statistically a group of projects inside your company, that kind of what was the situation before BIM? How much we were spending money in kind of the different things, like kind of changes and so forth? How much money did we spend then? What is the kind of change in the current project where we are using BIM? And so kind of following the implementation over time and measuring the kind of your average outcome of projects. I think that's the only reliable way. I know that there are some companies in UK who also have been approaching it so that they are trying to estimate the price tag of the kind of all changes, and then they when they find some mistakes in the model and correct the model before they start building, then they kind of always kind of put the price tag. Okay, this change was not needed on the site because we discovered it early enough, and then they put the price tag on that and try to calculate from that. But it's a little bit difficult to kind of say that, because in a way, can you be sure that you wouldn't have found that mistake without BIM? It's a little bit speculative. So I think that this long-term following of your business results, it's the most reliable way to see that.
Järgmine küsimus.
I can ask one more about the return on the investment. Like, how fast the companies expect the return?
Again, it's kind of a you have tricky questions. It depends on so many factors. Some people are so fast learning it, kind of, and I have seen amazing results that some people just grasp the idea and they are there immediately. And for some people, it's really, really complicated. Typically, I would say that kind of probably it will take a couple of projects to start kind of practicing and learning how to use it. If you kind of think that kind of a first project is probably negative impact. Second project, if you do it well, it can be break even. And the third project might be profitable. I would say that that's about, and then of course kind of the time frame depends on what is your project cycle, how fast you have the different projects going. I don't know, it's kind of this is of course something that also you might be able to kind of say, because you have been following out when companies are implementing that. But I think that there is you at least better expect that there is some learning process and some price that you have to pay for the learning. So personally, I would say that, okay, maybe after third project you start getting profits. I don't know. Anybody disagreeing or having different opinion about that? But as said, that individual differences are really huge.
If no one else is asking, I'm asking the question, if it's okay to Arto. You mentioned about that we are having some technical problems with the tools and applications. but you also mentioned that the technology is becoming mature enough that we can actually start to use them. So these two aspects are kind of like a controversial a little bit. So why do we still have still have those technical problems then?
Well, first of all, I think that kind of the main problem is really what I said about this, that the model is an abstraction for reality for a purpose. So the different models of different domains and the different usages of the models, it's a complicated issue because it's kind of, and it's not so that it would be one-to-one. For example, the architectural model and the thermal simulation model, they are quite different if you really think about that. And that transformation between those two views, it's technically quite demanding. It has been, first of all, it has been taking quite a long time to kind of get the understanding what's the problem. And then kind of implementing the solutions to the problems, it's taking time. So these issues are more complicated when you kind of start going into the details that people in the beginning believe. When we founded the International Alliance for Interoperability in 1996, at that time I think that everybody in that founding meeting were thinking that we will solve the interoperability problems in a couple of years. Autodesk, which was one of the founding members, they were saying that in 18 months we will have the full interoperability. So I think everybody else was a little bit more kind of careful about the time scale that we thought that might be a little bit longer than that. But I don't think that anyone around the table would have believed that after 15 years we are still on the road. But it doesn't mean that kind of, and I want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that you couldn't use the technologies. It's just that kind of, and you can't expect that everything happens automatically and easily. There are some challenges, but Senate Properties has demanded BIM since 2007. And they have been using the IFC between the projects. Tommy actually could probably tell a lot about stories about the difficulties in there, but it functions. The projects have been built and kind of, you can overcome those challenges, but it's just that kind of, don't expect that everything is working as perfectly as you would like.
So basically what you're also adding is that it's not only a technical issue, but it's also important to coordinate and manage this process. Once we know those problems, we can actually overcome those problems.
That's absolutely true, and quite often actually the situation can be just kind of the question that how do you model in your application something so that it's useful for the others. So it's not just kind of the technical transformation from software A to software B. It can be also how do you work inside the application A so that the information content in the native format there is something that you can translate to somebody else. And that requires understanding of the needs and also the technical processes.
On keegi veel, kes sooviks küsida, et mina võin siin jätkata veel õhtuni, aga...
I have a question about construction documents. Let's say you showed us a very nice picture of how the ducts are in 3D on construction site. But if we are talking of this BIM world, what are the actual construction documents that are used on the construction site? What do you give to this trained personnel who is starting to install these ventilation pipes, whatever? How it's done in BIM world?
It's again a really excellent question. It's of course the traditional documents, the drawings are still needed, and in many cases those are the legal documents or contract documents, because in most countries, to my knowledge, there is no country that would have been defining the legal status of the models compared to the documents, which is kind of, so it's usually the documents are the legal documents related to the agreements and contracts. But usually nowadays in the BIM environment, you are giving the models to the contractors and subcontractors, and kind of, they can be spread around the supply chain. And they can be, if the receiver is able to use them, then they are using those models directly. As I said it, that, for example, I know several cases in the United States where the construction company is explaining to the workers, kind of using the 3D models, walkthroughs, and really building the 4D modeling, so that kind of you schedule the different components. You show how something should be built from the model rather than from the documents. So to me, it's kind of continuity from the total 2D drawings to full 3D, and kind of depending on the case, you are kind of moving somewhere in between that. Sometimes you use drawings, sometimes you use the 3D models for the communication, but usually they don't have an official legal status. So if there are any kind of an arguments about, for example, that is there some mistake in the design, then you go to the drawings, which have been generated from the model, and they are used for that purpose. So it's really kind of very much dependent on the situation and case, and there are very different cases how the models are used in that communication process.
Thank you. I have another question about design work. You explained us that every party in the design team is having its own BIM model, and there is no such situation that there is one general model that everybody is changing. But as I understand you correct, there still is a general model, for example, for checking that there are no contradictions in different parties of different designers. But who in the design team is usually creating this central model? Which party in the design team, and well, this responsibility I'm asking about.
Yeah, it's definitely so that there is no such central model in that sense that somebody would be creating that. It's actually so that kind of the one who is doing the integration work, kind of a virtual project manager, or kind of the BIM champion, or whatever you want to call him, a person who is responsible of the kind of managing the modeling process. It's taking the domain models and merging them together, for example, in tools like Navisworks or Solibri Model Checker, putting them together, and there are some technical features in the software that can identify already some of the clashes. You can actually modify the rules so that kind of what type of clashes you find there. So the software itself can report some of the clashes as well. But the idea is that the software is not kind of trying to find the solutions for those clashes. It's something that the design team is then getting the reports from those integrated models and then going through the different issues. Is this something that we have to make changes, and who is making the change? So if I take, for example, the example that the hole is in a different place than the duct, the software cannot decide which one is correct. It's really kind of in the teamwork that it's required for that. And there must be somebody who is taking the role of being the virtual project manager, managing the virtual project, or the project in the virtual environment. And there are people who have been specialized on that company. Well, Tommy is one of those companies. Tommy is going to speak in the afternoon. Tommy Henttinen from Gravikon. Gravikon is a company that is providing that kind of services. But it can be also, it can be an architect, it can be the structural engineer, it can be the construction company. Usually when somebody is asking me that who should do it, my answer is that whoever is capable to do that. It's a new role, and the marketplace is open, so who can provide the best services in that area will get the job. That's the way it goes. But it's really, and then the responsibilities is always by the designer who has made the mistake, not the one who did not find the mistake. That's actually in the Finnish COBIM, these national BIM requirements, it's documented very clearly there that even if somebody is doing the model checking, and if there is something that person didn't find, he is not responsible of that mistake. The responsibility is always by the party who made that. Of course, then the question is that, for example, taking that example that hole and duct are in the different places, it's not so straightforward to say, is the HVAC designer guilty or is the structural designer guilty? And I think that we should kind of move into the environment rather finding the solutions than who is guilty.
I would maybe like to add to this one, but I was asked pretty much the same question at my thesis defense in Haifa at the Technion. And they asked me to predict what's going to be the future in terms of, let's say, the skills and the knowledge that is acquired from the people working in the construction process. But let's say in the future, in the idealistic world, every discipline, including the design project manager, including the construction manager, they all have to know their own tools, their own applications. And of course, they also need to know the purpose of BIM for how and for who and when to share what kind of information. But it seems that at the moment, because we still have a lot of engineers who are, let's say, older generation engineers, and it might be more difficult for them to adopt to the new technologies. So in many cases that happens is that they add new people to this process. But this is probably going to be the state for the next few 5-10 years maybe. But in the future, every discipline should use their own specific tools, I think.
Great.
Kas on veel kellelgi küsimusi? Või tahaks juba kohvile minna? Aga teeme siis nii, et oleme selleks korraks lõpetanud ja täname Artot, teeme suure aplausi. Ja nüüd on siis selline asi, et tasulised kuulajad kõik lähevad siis 4. korrusele, on mul õiguse. Ning tudengitega siis leiate endale ise siin koha, aga kohvi siis ootab tasulisi kuulajaid 4. korrusele, siit uksest välja ja trepist üles, palun.
Võtke omad kuule, see on toetutalong, jah? Meil on...
videos. Zoomidaan se vielä. Se on vähän haaste jäätä.